Hi and welcome all, high or low, butcher baker, tall or small. I am Grimnir and this is the Grimnir Gate. Short, hairy and downright ugly, with coarse voices and beefy noses, they prefer the dirt and dark earth underground to the bright and open seas and skies. Even if they are strong and crafty, that is more often than not overshadowed by their greedy, unforgiving and vindictive nature. Then we have the chosen ones, the beautiful, graceful and benevolent ones, living among trees and leaves, close to stream and sea in peaceful harmony with nature and beast. Given immortality and great wisdom through the ages, more often than not, singing with silver voices rather than prone to deeds of war, weapons and destruction. Is this the true image of dwarves and elves in Middle-earth? Are all things true? Is God an astronaut, Oz over the rainbow and Midgets where the monsters live? Well, of course, it is all a matter of perspective, even though I must say that few comparisons have started with more uneven conditions than this one between dwarves and elves of Middle-earth. And you might assume where this is heading, but not how we would get there. So welcome to the first out of 3 rounds of Tavern Talks concerning dwarves versus elves in Middle-earth. And as it is springtime festival, we return to Thorins Hall Inn, especially since the theme is about the dwarves themselves. To lay a solid groundwork for this, we need to get all the facts straight and begin in the beginning. Just a few things that need to be known to understand that this is not a fair competition, even if we go way back in time. Everything begins with Eru Iluvatar. From the thoughts and will of the great creator, father of all, came the Ainur, the angelic godlike creatures. Through their music, most of them following the 3 themes laid out by Iluvatar, the universe E8 was created. And in that universe, the world of Arda, with both Aman and Middle-earth, came into existence. So, during the 3rd and the last theme of the music of the Ainur, Iluvatar sang into being his own children, namely the elves and men, the firstborn and the secondborn. The vision of the world and its creatures, especially the firstborn, brought great amazement and wonder to the Ainur, and some of the gods chose to enter the world as Valar to tend, protect it, and wait for the awakening of the children. One of the mightiest of these were Aule, the smith, Mahal, the maker, shaper of Arda, and a great delighter in crafting and transformation of matter. He didn't have the patience to wait for Iluvatar's children, and thus created beings of his own, the 7 fathers of the dwarves that he wanted to learn and teach about everything he loved himself. But only Iluvatar could create true life, and when Aule understood that he'd gone against Eru's will and intentions, he raised his hammer to destroy his creations, the dwarven fathers. Iluvatar then intervened and allowed the dwarves to become his adopted children, on the condition that they did not awake before his firstborn. So the fathers got laid to rest and wait deep under the mountains of Middle-earth. They were made strong and sturdy, hard to many diseases, and with quite long lives compared to men. But first and foremost, they were made to be strong in will and spirit, to be able to resist the influence of Melkor and his creatures. Both races awoke during the Age of the Trees. This was the age after the Age of the Lamps, but before the Age of the Sun and Moon. It was also an age when the darkness of Middle-earth only was lit by the stars, and the dangers of Melkor roamed the lands. The only other light to be found was far away from the two trees in Valinor, in distant Aman, where the gods lived. After the awakening of the 144 elves at Lake Cuivinen, we know that Durin the First also awoke in Gundabad, most certainly the other dwarven fathers too, under other great mountain ranges across Middle-earth. When the Valar discovered the elves, they immediately feared for their safety and lives, and understood that in Middle-earth they were under the imminent threat of Melkor's rule. It is even told that some of the firstborn were captured by Melkor and by torture turned into twisted mockeries of elves, and thus becoming the first orcs. So now the Valar decided that it was time to start the first war in Arda. A war for the sake of the elves against Melkor and his minions. During this war, the elves at Cuivinen were guarded and protected from the enemy until all was over. A war brought devastating and changed the lands of Middle-earth, and a war that most certainly was noticed by and affected the dwarves also, that hid totally on their own under the mountains. A war that also awoke the hate and resentment of Melkor towards the firstborn. After the defeat and imprisonment of Melkor, the Valar offered the elves to come to the lands of Aman, where they would be safe, able to enjoy the light of the trees and learning many things from the Valar. Not all elves completed this great journey to become high elves. Some stayed behind out of fear, and some got lost or distracted on the way. So, what do we know about the survival and the fate of the adopted, or maybe even the unwanted children of Iluvatar during this time? We know that they are hardy and resilient, especially when it comes to the influence of the Dark One during this time. We also know that Durin the First, or Durin the Deathless, awakes in Gundabad and travels south along the Misty Mountains, the same mountain range that Melkor created to hinder Orome on his hunts in Middle-earth. Durin, the oldest of the dwarfs, becomes the founder and first king of the Longbeards, or Durin's folk, and he starts building Khazad-dûm, the greatest dwarf dwelling in the world. During this time, the Firebeards and the Broadbeams of the Ered Luin builds another two great dwarven cities, Nogrod or Tubhun Sahar and Belegos or Gabil Gatol, and also start building the great road from Beleriand and eastward through Middle-earth. We also know that some sort of relative or kin of exiled version of dwarfs called Pity Dwarfs actually were the first creature to enter the lands of Beleriand. They were hunted to the verge of extinction by the elves that came after, and believing them to be witless creatures or animals. Not until the elves met the larger kin from Ered Luin they understood that petty dwarfs was more than soulless animals. So, what will the conclusion be of all these facts from the earlier ages of Arda? Well, don't we all love the underdog? Or at least we should be more inclined to, shouldn't we? Someone who stands up against a man and resists even the odds tightly stacked against them. And if you have been listening to these tales from the time before the time was counted, it is quite clear who is the underdog in this story. Unwanted at first, then faced with the threat of imminent destruction by the very same hands that created them. Then allowed to exist only as adopted and second-class creatures in the eyes of even the mighty Eru Iluvatar himself. Still fending quite well for themselves during the very harsh conditions in Middle-earth before during and sometime after the Great War of the Gods, when Melkor finally gets imprisoned. While their pampered and spoiled foregoers and favorites of the gods sat protected around the Lake Cuivenen, and then were offered safe passage and a life among the gods in Aman, the dwarves on their own created at least 3 mighty kingdoms and thrived by their own skills and might in Middle-earth. So, in the next round we shall continue this comparison in the First Age, where many great events and conflicts takes place, where both of these races have very important roles. But this first round, as the mighty underdogs of Middle-earth, goes to the dwarves, with no hesitation at all. Thank you for listening. Take care, and please come back.